Having a centralized store in our web applications can be a really nice thing. Up until now, we've been having all of our state stored in, well, basically in the components that we're working with. But what if we have multiple components that each need to share data back and forth? Or you want to have components that maybe just display data that another component sets, or you just want to refresh components whenever data does refresh. A centralized store can help out with that. Now, if we're coming from JavaScript land, where we have React, Redux for the longest time was the centralized store to use. And there's a bunch more to choose from in that area. But here in Rust and Yew land, we also have plenty of choices. Now, the one that I'm choosing for this course and the one that I'm using personally is called Yewdux, which should be easy to remember because it's a play on Redux. But so far, I've been enjoying it quite a bit. So we're going to be using that to set up a centralized store. Now, there's two ways to do stuff, which is first struct-based components with setting up, and then functional-based. We'll be going over the functional-based in another lesson. For this one, let's go ahead and set up Yewdux. So to begin with, let's head on over to crates and find Yewdux. Here we go. We have Yewdux. This pretty much shows everything we need to do to get everything working here. We're going to go ahead and bring in Yewdux 082. So let's head into our cargo.toml, add in Yewdux, let Rust Analyzer do its thing. Now, to this is as much as we need to install Yewdux. So we'll mark that as completed. Next thing, create a counter store with a default value. So we're going to create just a very simple counter application, something that displays a number and you press a button and that number increments upwards. To do that, we need to create a centralized store first. Now, Yewdux and many other centralized stores across all of the different front-end frameworks are now recommending that we have multiple stores, one for each different type of data that we're going to have. So because of that, I recommend that we create a stores folder. I'm going to, in here, we're going to mod stores. And let's create a counter store.rs. And this is where we're going to put the store for it. Now, in this app, we're only going to have one, but I wanted to show off that this is how we can have multiple stores and use them. The reason why we want to have multiple stores is because if we change anything in one store, anything that's sort of subscribed to that store is going to refresh its view. And you don't necessarily want the entire app to refresh if something happens, just a little part of it. All right, so to create our store, it's pretty much as simple as creating a struct for things. So I'm going to call this a counter store. Pub struct counter store. And let's put in a account. We do want that to be public so we can get access to it. And this is going to be a U32. Okay, now we do need to derive a few things. And then first of all, before we even do that, let's bring in use Yewdux prelude. All right, so we can now derive, store. That's going to be the big one. Now this yells at us and it tells us everything we need to do to make the store work. So first of all, it needs default setup. We can either set up default manually if we want count to be anything other than what the default macro would give us. The default macro on numbers gives us 0. And I'm fine with that. We're going to start with default. Also, it's asking for this, well, it's telling us hey, we can't do this binary operation not equals. Well, that's telling us that we need partial equal. Okay, so this seems to be okay. Let's continue on and see if it yells at us anymore. So this should be enough for us to start with our store. Let's head back over. Well, it's over here. We've created a counter store with a default value. We want to work on a display for this. So I'm going to create a component which we're going to call display count. And this is just going to simply display the count for us. Okay, so we're going to use u prelude star. We're also going to need Yewdux for this. So use Yewdux prelude star. We're going to use the struct base style here because we're going to have another lesson for functional. Okay, so we have a pub struct display count. We do need to store. We need to store like the thing that happened, right? Like the actual like the store itself, which we could also get through dispatch. So let's actually just display the dispatch, which is going to be dispatch. We get this from Yewdux prelude, and then it's asking for the store. So this is the counter store. Import component for display count and implement those missing members. Okay, so type message. This, we absolutely need to set this up as a special enum for us. So we're gonna have a pub enum MSG. I can't call this message because then we're gonna lose this here. Okay, so message, this is going to be maybe like store or state, and it's going to include a store. Oh wait, it's going to include an RC and then the actual counter store. Okay. Our type message is going to be the MSG. Properties. We don't need properties for this component, so we'll just set that to nothing. When we create this component, what do we need to have happen? Well, we need to have this dispatch here. So let's grab that really quickly. Equals dispatch. We need to give it the type that we're getting. So this is the counter store. And we want to do, what is it called? It is subscribe to this. And then this is like the on change thing here. Like what are we expecting to have happen? So we really want to send out the message for this store. But we're going to use the context for this. So it's going to be context. We're going to get a link and then a callback. And then for this function, it's just going to be the MSG store, but we're not going to pass anything in the parentheses. It's looking a little bit strange the way that this looks and works. Basically, what's going to happen is that whenever anything changes, whenever we create this, it's going to send a message immediately. So we're telling it, hey, on subscription, go ahead or when things change, go ahead and send a message with the store in, and it's looking for this. It's going to pass in the RC counter store for us. Okay, so we get the dispatch now. I want to return a self with the dispatch inside. All right. So now it's showing that we're not using this yet, which is not surprising. So in to do, we need to return some HTML. We're going to do this is not going to be the top level, so let's do like an H2. And I probably want more than one thing in here, so let's do like a div. We'll do an H2 inside. And you will be count. And then in here, let's do just a simple div. And then the actual count itself. Well, to get the store, to get the count, we can actually grab it using the get method. So let's do let count equals self dispatch get. That gives us an RC counter store. Now, RC stands for reference count. It's a smart pointer, and it dereferences automatically to the thing inside of it. So I can kind of just pretend that I have a counter store already, and let's just get the current count, which is going to give us a U32. I now put that in here, and that should display the count for us. I don't need this context, so I'm going to underscore you. Let's head back to our main library and grab out our display count and display that down here. Okay, so we have our H1 app. Let's say inside, I don't even need this div necessarily because we have one inside of that component. We're going to do a display count. Save you. Oh, it's not. Wrong type of slash. And then everything should be good. Let's go back to here. Oh, and here we have our app and our count is 0. Okay, great. We are on our way. So we're displaying our counter. But of course, it's not really helpful. We need to create a button to increment that count to make it, well, worth anything at all. So that's going to be another component. So let's over here, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call this increment count. And same exact thing as before. We're going to use u prelude and use Yewdux prelude. All right, so pub struct. This is going to be our increment count. We are also going to keep a dispatch here. And this is the counter store. Impl component for increment count. Okay, same exact thing that we need to do with the previous one. So we're going to do a pub enum store. This is an MSG. This has a store, which is a tuple type with the RC counter store. Okay, type message equals MSG. Again, we don't need any properties. When we create, we need to create that dispatch. We're going to subscribe. We'll use the context, link, callback. Did I accidentally pull in? I did not. Okay, great. The function is now going to be the MSG store without the parentheses. And There we go. Okay, we're happy there. And then we're going to return self with a dispatch. Okay, now we're going to want some kind of button. And then when we click the button, we want it to update the store. Now, to have the update functions, we're going to probably need another message here. So button clicked. Let's add that in. So that, okay. So our view, HTML. All right, so we'll start with a div. Maybe we'll do a, I don't know if we need like an H1 or anything else. We'll just do, actually, we could just do this as just a plain button here. So a button. We'll label this increment count. Okay, so on click, what do we need to have happen? So let's do that here. So let on click equals, we need to create a context link, probably just a callback. This callback function, so you take in, we don't actually care what the event is. We're not going to do anything with it. And now this function requires us to return a message, I believe. So let's put in MSG button clicked. Okay. So we have this on click, type annotations needed. Oh, well, it doesn't know what this event is yet, so we need to use it. So we're just going to do on click here. And suddenly it knows that this is a mouse event now. Okay, awesome. So now we have a callback mouse event that we need update now. I like to do that between the create and the views. So we're going to do a function update. Okay, so we're going to take in the message here. So the message is going to be this actual message that happens, or it's going to be like the on change message as it were. So let's do let's handle that. So we're going to match message, build the match arms. Okay, so if we get the store, that's a that's an actual store, isn't it? I don't actually really care about this, do I? Because it's gonna hit here, it's gonna update. Well, you know, when this thing changes, so subscribe actually tells us when something changes, want you to update. I don't. We'll see. We might need something like this. We might need to change that. Let's for right now just ignore it, and we'll do nothing. In fact, if you come in and you change, let's just set you to be false. We don't need to re-render or do anything else. And we'll see how that goes. And this store, we're not using you, so underscore. Now, if the button is clicked, what do we want to happen? We need to take in this dispatch and then do something called a reduce on it. So self.dispatch. We're going to do a reduce, which takes in a closure, and we get the store, which in this case is the RC counter store. Now, if I do this, the counter store isn't allowed to return anything at all. So if I want to change anything, I need to actually return out of here. So it actually shows here, this function takes in a RC with the store and returns an RC store. But it has to be like, you notice there's no method, there's no mutation, there's no references here. It's a full new one. So it would have to clone the store or at least create a brand new one. So it would have to be something, like this. We're going to return a counter store count, and you're going to be store.count plus 1. So, see, returning you. What are you yelling about? Oh, and then that's just this reduce that's going. Let's go ahead and show that. We're going to semicolon you. There we go. And we're going to return false. I don't need this to necessarily update this component. This component can just stay static and never update. And that's what this false is doing. All right, let's go ahead and get this running. We've done a lot of code without checking it. So we're going to head back to our main library, pull this in now. So use increment count, and we'll put it right under here. All right, so here's our increment count. When I click it, nothing seems to be happening here. So something is going on. I think that what we need to do is in the other counter store, or no, not counter store, in the display count, we need to know that it's updating, right? And unfortunately, nothing is happening here. So we need to, whenever this thing changes, return true on that update method. So let's bring in update here. I'm gonna match on message. We're gonna take in the store. I don't necessarily care about this. I'm just gonna say, hey, if we get this message, let's return true here. Let's go ahead, come back to here and try it again. And now it works. So we can now click here and increment the count. Now, one last thing before we end. I'm going to come back to the increment count method here, and we're going to show you a slightly different way to do this reduce, because this is nice, but if we just want to mutate this, then this is like a little bit too much. What if we had like 100 things in this counter store and we just want to change one of them? What we can do is, instead of, let's bring this back here, dispatch dot, there's all the reduce stuff, but then there's a reduce mute. I'm going to choose a reduce mute. This gives us the store. And notice now that the store is a mutable reference to counter store. So we're going to do store.count plus equals to 1. Reduce mute, the trait bound. Oh, so here's something interesting. The trait bound counter store clone is not satisfied. So it's actually giving us a clone of it behind the scenes. So it's kind of still following the same rules of that reduce, but now we need to add clone to the display count store. So let's go find this here, and we'll add in clone. Everything seems to be working. Let's head back over to here, and there we go. It's all working. Let's do a really quick review, because this was a bit. So to begin with, we installed Yewdux. We just went over to crates.io. We got the latest version of Yewdux and we pulled it in. We created a counter store. The counter store is just simply a struct with whatever data we want in it, with the store macro from Yewdux inside of it. We also did have to add in a default partial equal and clone, because we're using that a reduce mute. We display the counter using a struct component, using where we get the dispatch. The dispatch, we subscribe to it, so we get a message back whenever the counter store updates. We did have to run the update function ourselves to then catch whenever the store updates and then return true. So that way, this component will update for us. And then finally, we created an increment function, or increment component, that whenever we hit a button, it sends a message to itself here. We don't care whenever the store gets updated, so we're turning false whenever this happens. But then when the button gets clicked, we do this reduce mute. We grab our store, we increment the count, and we're still telling this component don't update. The other one does, though. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.